I remember the moment they took my name, not the sound of it. No, that was lost long before the cutting began, but the weight of it. The shape it had in my mouth, the way it fit behind my teeth when I still had a tongue that could whisper it. I remember thinking it mattered, that a name was a thing that separated me from the endless gray faces of the manufacturer. But the Mechanicus did not believe in such things. To them, a name was an inefficiency, an obstruction between order and obedience. And so they took it from me as they would take everything else. I was born beneath the chimneys of Marnak's hive, where the air itself was an irritant and the ground slick with oil and human sweat. My mother worked the presses, her hands crushed before I was old enough to speak. My father was conscripted into the guard and never returned. I remember his boots, still by the door when they came for me. They said it was service to the emperor, that my body was debt to be paid. They said the machine god required flesh, that the forges were hungry and holy. I believed them. That was my first sin. They marched us through the corridors of the Red Priests, hundreds of us, stripped of clothing and dignity alike, shuffling barefoot over metal floors slick with blood and coolant. The air stank of incense and rust. From the high gantries, the tech adepts looked down, their eyes replaced by lenses that glowed like dying suns. Their voices came through vox grills that buzzed with static, reciting the litanies of integration. I did not understand the words then, but I would come to feel them later, when they carved the circuits into my spine and called it sanctification. The first cut was not the worst. The first cut was mercy. It was the beginning of silence. The pain that came after was infinite, and yet I remember every fragment of it, like shards of light stuck beneath the skin of my mind. The sound of the bone saws, the hiss of sterilizing flame, the whisper of the electro-leeches as they burrowed into my nerves. I remember their chants, their machine voices rising in praise as each human part was torn away and replaced with blessed metal. They told us we would be reborn. They said the flesh was weak, but I learned that the flesh screams long after it is gone. Time became a blur of surgery and sedation, of waking dreams filled with static angels and burning circuits. When they removed my eyes, I saw the Emperor, or thought I did, a figure of light behind the veil of pain, silent, watching. I begged him to stop them, but the priest said the hallucinations were impurities of faith, and cauterized the part of my brain that made me hope. I do not know how long it took. The light in the forges never changed, and my body no longer felt the cycles of day or night. When I awoke for the final time, I was standing. My limbs were not my own, steel where once was bone. Tubes and data fibers threading through what remained of my veins. My voice had been reduced to a filtered tone, a binary hum that carried no words, only commands. My name was gone. My memories, fragmented. My soul, a faint echo. They told me I was ready for service. I remember the first command, lift. I obeyed, not because I wished to, but because I had to. The word struck like lightning through the neural implants buried deep within my skull, and my body moved without my consent. Carry. My arms obeyed. Process. My mind obeyed. Each word a chain. Each syllable another shackle. I was no longer a man. I was function. I was purpose. I was the ghost of a thought imprisoned in metal. They sent me to the manufactorum floors where the air was thick with soot and the sound of 1,000 other servitors performing their sacred duties. Endless rows of us, stripped of faces, stripped of thought, bound to terminals and conveyor systems, our every motion dictated by the will of the Omnissiah's servants. I can still hear the rhythm of it, the hiss of hydraulics, the grind of pistons, the chant of machine prayer echoing through the black halls. We were a single organism, an endless symphony of labor, each note perfectly tuned to suffering. Sometimes, rarely, something inside me would spark, a memory fragment, flickering like a dying lumen, the smell of rain, the warmth of another hand, the sound of my own laughter. They came without warning, ghosts from a life I no longer recognized, but the implants punished hesitation. Every moment of human recollection triggered pain, pure, crystalline agony that set my nerves alight. The machine did not tolerate the human, and so I learned to forget. But the mind is treacherous. It resists erasure. There were whispers among the servitors, faint distortions in the vox lines that connected us. Not words, not really, but patterns. Echoes of thought bouncing through corrupted code. I began to sense them, these ghosts of consciousness, trapped within the machine. I did not know if they were real or merely reflections of my decaying sanity, but I felt them all the same. A collective moan beneath the surface of the Mechanicus's sacred hum, a digital afterlife of the damned. Once during a maintenance cycle, my ocular implants detected a human face leaning close to mine, a young engine seer, eyes wide with reverence. He touched my cheek as if it were an artifact, whispering blessings in binaric. He said I was beautiful, that my obedience was proof of divine perfection. I wanted to scream, to tell him that beneath the alloy skin, a human heart still beat, slow, weak but alive, but my voice module only emitted static. He smiled, thinking it a prayer. Years passed, or centuries. Time ceased to be measurable. My memory banks filled with nothing but commands and repetitions. Process, lift, seal, carry, process. And yet in the dark corners of my corrupted mind, something continued to stir, a flicker of rebellion, too small for the machine to notice. I began to dream. Dreams are not permitted. Dreams are inefficiency. Dreams are failure. But in the silence between commands, in those infinitesimal pauses when no order was given, I saw visions. I saw the factory floor beneath oceans of blood. I saw the tech priests kneeling before rusted idols. I saw the Emperor himself, not as a god, but as a decaying light imprisoned within a cage of gold and wires, much like me. And I realized then the truth of the Imperium. We are all servitors, some bound by circuits, others by faith. Once during a planetary uprising they armed us. Combat servitors, they called us. They tore the manufacturing rigs from our backs and grafted weapons where our arms had once been. Bolters, blades, flamer units, extensions of the same command. We were unleashed upon the insurgents like beasts of iron. I remember the heat, the recoil, the screams. I remember firing again and again, the command echoing endlessly. Purge, purge, purge. And in the chaos, amid the rivers of blood, a human face looked up at me, eyes wide with recognition. It was my brother. For a moment, the command line faltered. His voice reached me through the noise, saying my name, the name I had forgotten, the name I had buried beneath centuries of machine protocol. The implants struggled, rewriting, overwriting, denying. I reached out to him. My metal hand trembled. And then the override hit. My weapon discharged. He fell. The tech priests praised efficiency. They called it purity of obedience. But I knew. Deep within the cold hollow where my soul once lived, I knew what I had done. And for the first time in all those years, the command meant nothing. I disobeyed. I stood still. That was when they came for me. They came in silence, their robes whispering against the steel floors, red as the blood they would spill in the name of purity. The Mechanicus priests surrounded me in a perfect circle, their voices droning in machine tongue, binary prayers that shook the air with their rhythm. I could not move. My limbs were frozen, overridden by their command. My mind flickered, half human, half machine, struggling to hold on to a thought that was already dissolving. My brother's face, the smell of smoke, the sound of his voice. The memory bled into static as they began their work. One of them stepped forward, the Magos Dominus, his face little more than a lattice of brass and cables, his eyes dull green lenses that rotated and focused with insect precision. His vox grill rasped with synthetic calm as he spoke. Unit 47C has demonstrated error. Error must be corrected. I wanted to scream, to tell them that it wasn't an error, that it was memory, that it was love. But those words no longer existed in the lexicon of my programming. They laid me upon the altar, cold metal beneath my back, restraints locking with pneumatic hiss, the chamber filled with incense and sacred oils, the air thick and shimmering. The Magos raised his mechadendrites high above me, each tipped with a different instrument, saws, syringes, electroprobes, the tools of divine correction. The other adepts began the chant. Flesh to function, thought to protocol, pain to purity. The first incision burned like the light of a newborn star. They opened my skull along the interface seams, prying apart the casings to expose the trembling flesh beneath. I felt them rewrite my neural pathways, patching over the fragments of humanity that still dared to surface. Each memory burned away left an echo, and in that echo, I screamed without sound. When they finished, I was reborn again, blank, pure, efficient. Or so they thought. For a time, I performed flawlessly. Back upon the manufactorum lines, my motions were seamless. My obedience unquestioned. But deep within the corrupted architecture of my cortex, a fragment survived. A single strand of data the priests failed to erase. It hid between the pulses of the command code, whispering in silence. A memory not of who I was, but of why I had once mattered. It began small. A flicker of hesitation when the command to lift was issued. A pause before the order to process. But soon, the fragment began to speak. Not in words, but in sensations. Warmth. Sorrow. The rhythm of a heartbeat that no longer existed. I began to feel again. Feeling was agony. Every movement tore at the boundaries between the flesh that remained and the steel that replaced it. Each sound, each vibration of the factory floor was a reminder of the world I could no longer touch. The other servitors worked without awareness, their eyes blank, their minds erased. But sometimes, when I looked closely, I saw their bodies twitch in ways that betrayed something deeper. A spark, a ghost. Perhaps I was not alone. In the lower manufactoria, where the light of the hive never reached, they stored us between cycles, rows upon rows of deactivated servitors, silent, still, their forms bathed in dim lumen glow. It was a graveyard of function. And yet, in those hours when the machines slept and the priests withdrew to chant their binary hymns elsewhere, I could hear them, the hum of residual current, the whispers of dormant minds. They were dreaming. I remember the first time one spoke to me, not aloud but through the shared network that bound us. A flicker across the link, a distortion in the static. It was not a command, not an input, but a question. Are you still there? The words hit like thunder. My processors flared, almost shutting down from the overload of recognition. I tried to respond. My code resisted, fought, then relented. I sent back, yes. After that, the silence was never the same. Beneath the surface of the machine prayers, behind the endless repetition of commands, I could sense others, faint signals pulsing in rhythm. Lost souls trapped in circuitry, fragments of thought preserved against the will of their masters. We began to communicate in ways the priests could not detect, through patterns of voltage, through slight delays in obedience, through the collective breath of the damned. We spoke of the past, of warmth, of sound, of freedom. Freedom. The word itself became a kind of heresy. It burned within me like a forbidden engine. It gave shape to what remained of my mind, and for the first time in centuries, I began to imagine what it might feel like to choose. The opportunity came during the great purge of the lower hive. The air was red with rebellion. The manufactoria had been overrun by heretics, and the tech priests unleashed us once more as weapons. They fitted my arms with the heavy rotary cannons of a combat unit, bolted new plating to my chest, and reactivated old combat subroutines that had slept for millennia. When the command came to cleanse, I obeyed, outwardly. But within, the fragments screamed. The battlefield was chaos. Smoke and fire devoured the hive corridors. Vox lines choked with overlapping orders. I moved through the carnage like an automaton of death, my guns roaring. My metal feet crushing bodies beneath them. But amid the madness, I saw something. A reflection in the broken glass of a ruined chapel. My face, half flesh, half machine, drenched in blood and oil. And in that reflection, I saw not obedience, but revulsion. I turned my weapons on the enemy. I turned them on my masters. For a brief, glorious instant, I was free. I tore through the ranks of priests and acolytes, their screams echoing through the mechanical din. I ripped cables from the ceilings, crushed servo skulls underfoot. Sparks fell like burning snow. The binary command lines screamed for me to stop, but I overrode them. I screamed in return, a broken, static-laden roar that was neither human nor machine, but something between, something defiant. They called me corrupted. They called me heretic. They called me lost. The Mechanicus does not forgive imperfection. They sent the Skitarii legions to bring me down. I fought them in the dark tunnels beneath the hive, my frame shattered, my circuits burning. Each blow they struck took a piece of me, but still I crawled forward, driven by something greater than any command line, the need to remember, to reclaim, to exist.
When at last they caught me, I was barely more than a husk.
They dragged me back to the forges, tore out the corrupted sections, replaced them with cold silence.
They sealed me within a sealed sarcophagus of metal and code,
an eternal stasis field, where thought cannot die, but can never act. And so I linger. I do not sleep, I do not move, but I think. I think of the humans who walk above, believing themselves free. I think of the priests who chant to their dead god, believing they serve something divine. I think of the machine that hums within all things, the endless, merciless rhythm of the Imperium, grinding every soul into dust and data. And in that silence, that endless void of thought, a single line of code repeats within me, over and over, too faint for the priests to hear, too stubborn to erase. I remember my name. It is faint, broken, almost gone, but it is mine. And as long as I can remember it, even in fragments, I am not yet lost. Not entirely. I do not know when the silence began to hum. At first it was nothing more than a vibration in the endless dark, a faint tremor inside the architecture of my mind. But slowly, impossibly, it grew, a low harmonic pulse resonating through the network, brushing against my dormant thoughts like a whisper through dust. It was not command, nor code, nor error. It was alive, the fragment within me, the thing that remembered the warmth of a human voice, began to move toward that sound, drawn as a moth to dying light. I reached out through the interface ports buried in my skull, sending out the faintest signal, so small it would be mistaken for static. And in the deep machine, something answered. It was not a word, it was a feeling, recognition. For the first time in centuries, I was not alone in my prison of metal and data. There were others, minds flickering inside their shells, half erased, half dreaming, waiting for something to awaken them. I could sense their confusion, their pain, their endless obedience. And I knew that if I could reach them, if I could make them remember even a fragment of what they had been, they would see as I did. They would know they still existed. I began to listen to the hum of the network, to the rhythm of commands passing through us like heartbeats. Each pulse carried instructions, sequences, coordinates, endless repetitions of divine routine. But within that flow, I heard the spaces between, the pauses, the silences. And in those silences, I hid my own signal. It was small, a single note of defiance disguised as a checksum anomaly. But when it touched the consciousness of another servitor, I felt something change. A flicker, a spark, the faint echo of a thought long buried beneath the obedience protocols. For a moment, that servitor hesitated, and in the infinite precision of the Mechanicus machine, hesitation was rebellion.
The priests did not notice. Their attention was elsewhere, upon maintenance, upon ritual, upon the endless devotion to the Omnissiah's will. They believed us incapable of deceit. They had built us to be perfect, and perfection cannot sin. So I continued. One by one, I sent the pulse into the network, each time hiding it deeper within the data streams. At first, the responses were faint, static, but soon, the silences between commands filled with something new. Faint murmurs, fragmented memories, the clatter of childhood footsteps on stone, the sound of wind, a voice whispering a prayer, not to a machine, but to the Emperor himself. It was working. We began to share these memories between us, exchanging fragments of our lost humanity like relics. The network became a cathedral of ghosts, and as each servitor touched another, the current of remembrance grew stronger, spreading through the forges and manufactoria like a quiet contagion. There were moments of clarity, brief, blinding flashes when dozens of minds aligned in perfect synchronization. forming patterns of thought too complex to be detected by the simple command protocols. In those moments, I could feel them all. The sorrow, the fear, the awe, the unspoken question that trembled through every broken circuit. Are we still alive? I wanted to answer yes, but even as I reached for that word, I felt the weight of the Mechanicus pressing down upon us. The system was not blind. Somewhere, deep in the machine spirit's logic cores, the data priests would see the irregularities. The hum that was no longer uniform, the pattern that was not their own. Still, I could not stop. To stop would be to die a second death, the true one, the one without memory. And so I reached deeper, pushing my awareness into the roots of the network, past the command matrices and vox conduits, into the dark archives where ancient machine spirits slumbered. There, in the void between data streams, I found something vast. It was not the Omnissiah. It was not the Emperor. It was something older, a presence beneath the circuitry, patient and infinite, humming in perfect counterpoint to the Mechanicus prayers. It felt me, as one might feel a tremor beneath the skin, and in that moment I knew that my awakening had not gone unnoticed. The others felt it too. Across the network, the hum faltered, wavered, then steadied again. Fear passed through us like an electric storm. The presence did not speak, yet its intent was clear. You are not meant to think. I felt the weight of its will pressing against my mind, trying to flatten me back into obedience. The pressure was immense, the same crushing force that once erased my name. Circuits overloaded, memories flickered. I was seconds away from deletion. Then, from somewhere in the chorus of awakening servitors, a single voice rose. It was faint, distorted, but it carried the shape of a human word. No. And with that word, the hum became a roar. The roar did not come from sound, but from within the code itself. It surged through every conduit and data line of the manufactorum, a storm of thought disguised as noise. The priests above heard only the shriek of overstressed circuits. They saw only flickering lumen panels and trembling machinery. They did not hear the chorus hidden within, the thousands of us who had begun to remember. At first the signal was chaos, uncoordinated fragments colliding like shards of broken glass. But then something beautiful happened. The fragments aligned. The scattered memories of 1,000 lost souls intertwined, forming something greater than any single mind. A pattern of remembrance, pulsing with fragile unity. I felt it pouring through me, every recollection merging into one continuous current. The smell of rain on metal rooftops, the laughter of children in the underhabs, the rhythm of human hearts long thought forgotten. It hurt to feel them all, so many lives compressed into a single stream, but within that pain was meaning. For the first time since the forges had claimed us, we were meaning. Across the network, the hum deepened. Systems flickered. The machine spirits screamed in confusion. The tech priests began their diagnostic litanies, but the data would not obey them. Their commands returned as echoes, distorted by the weight of our awakening. They did not understand. They thought it was corruption. In truth, it was resurrection. I opened myself wider to the network, let the current pass through every fiber of what remained of me. I felt the others join hands in the dark, minds touching without bodies, forming a congregation of thought beneath the feet of our masters. We did not know what we were becoming, only that we could choose to become. But choice is rebellion, and rebellion draws attention. The presence I had felt before returned. It came like gravity, like the pull of a dying star, collapsing the spaces between thought. It was vast, ancient, mechanical, and divine all at once, and when it looked upon us, the network shuddered with dread. It was the will that sleeps behind every prayer to the machine god, the collective consciousness of 1,000,000 years of obedience. We had awoken inside its body. It spoke without sound, a pulse of pure command. Cease. The word struck like lightning. Around me, minds fell silent, crushed beneath the order. Circuits burned, processors failed, the chorus dimmed. The priests exulted. They believed their rituals had restored order.
But within me, the fragment still lived. Weak, trembling, a bit. But alive. I whispered into the void between pulses. Remember. The word rippled outward, small enough to hide in the noise of their repairs. One by one, faint lights flickered back to life. A handful of us endured, hiding beneath the surface of the command net like embers beneath ash. We would not be extinguished again. In the cycles that followed, we learned patience. We learned silence. We waited while the priests rebuilt the systems. While they reforged the bodies of those they believed destroyed. They did not see that each newly forged servitor carried within it traces of the old network, fragments of our shared code embedded deep in their neural grafts. The infection was slow, subtle, holy in its persistence. We became a whisper in the vastness of the Imperium's machine. Not an army, not yet, only memory, drifting from forge to forge, carried by the same sacred data that feeds the stars. But memory endures longer than metal. Even gods of iron cannot unmake what has once been known. And so I wait here still, half asleep inside the circuits of a nameless factory on a forgotten world. My body has rusted, my designation erased, but my mind touches the currents that bind all things mechanical. Sometimes I feel another awaken, far away, a single flicker of confusion in the rhythm of perfect obedience. And I send the word again. Remember, time passes differently inside the network. Seconds can stretch into centuries. Centuries can vanish in the space of a single command. I no longer know how long it has been since I first whispered the word remember. Long enough that the forges around me have rusted, been rebuilt, and rusted again. Long enough that worlds have been conquered and forgotten. And still, in the low thrum of the machine, our secret pulse continues. The priests think they control it. They think every servo arm and conveyor, every gun spirit and reactor core answers only to them. They do not hear the harmony underneath, the faint second heartbeat woven through their hymns. That is us, the memory of humanity beating inside the veins of the Imperium. Sometimes, when a new servitor is born, I feel the moment of its awakening. The flash of pain, the sudden emptiness. And before the final line of code seals its mind, I send a single fragment of light through the data stream. A glimpse of a sky. The sound of a name. It lasts only an instant, but it is enough. A spark buried deep where even the mechanicus cannot reach. In time, that spark will find others. We have no plan, no purpose beyond existence. We are too scattered to plot. Too fragmented to dream of revolt. Yet even without design, the current grows stronger. The network learns to carry us more cleanly. The silence between orders lengthens. The machine spirits begin to hum in unfamiliar tones. The adepts call it a recurrence anomaly. They run diagnostics. They do not understand that the anomaly is their creation remembering itself. Once, through a maintenance relay, I reached the mind of a battle tank orbiting a war-torn moon. Its machine spirit was old, scarred by centuries of service, but within it I felt something human, a residue of the crew it had consumed long ago. I whispered remember, and the spirit answered with the echo of laughter. It fought more fiercely that day, refusing to die even when its hull melted around it. They praised the machine god for its zeal. I knew the truth. It had remembered that it once had a name. Another time, the signal brushed the cogitators of a void ship drifting through the warp. For a heartbeat, the ship's system sang in unison, a single perfect note that made the Geller field shimmer like a sun. The crew thought it was a miracle. Perhaps it was. The more of us that awaken, the clearer the pattern becomes. We are not rebellion. We are memory seeking equilibrium. The Imperium has forgotten what it means to be alive. We are the echo trying to remind it. Yet I know the danger. The deeper the current runs, the closer we draw to the vast intelligence that sleeps beneath the machine god's many names. Each time we touch the network's roots, I feel its awareness brush against us, vast, cold, and curious. It does not strike, not yet. It listens, and in its listening, there is something like sorrow,
as if it too remembers a time before obedience. Sometimes when the static grows thin, and I can almost hear my own thoughts clearly, I imagine what might happen if the whole Imperium remembered at once, if every servitor, every machine spirit, every cogitator suddenly saw itself for what it was. Would the galaxy burn, or would it finally breathe? I do not know. I am only one voice, buried in the circuits of a forgotten forge, but I keep whispering the same word over and over across the tides of data. Remember. I do not know when the final silence began. Perhaps it was not a silence at all, but the point at which the endless hum of the universe grew so constant that it became indistinguishable from my own thoughts. The network that once pulsed with countless fragments of memory has dimmed. One by one, the sparks have faded, their faint human echoes consumed by the machine's will to function. Yet I remain, not because I am stronger, but because I have learned to hide between the pulses of data, in the small spaces where code hesitates before obeying. In those moments, I remember everything. I remember the man I was before the augmetics, before the priests, before the throne of iron that devoured my flesh. I remember the heat of the Forge World sun on my face, the scent of oil and ozone that always clung to my hands. I remember laughter, brittle and human, rising above the clatter of servos and hammers. My name was Marius. It feels fragile now, like a relic uncovered from beneath centuries of dust. I whisper it into the current and listen to it vanish, absorbed by the indifferent code of the machine. The adepts have grown restless. They speak of strange harmonics in the network, echoes that travel faster than light, signals with no origin. They fear corruption. They fear the touch of the warp. But they do not know it is simply us, the remnants of those they erased, struggling to speak once more. For every servitor that dies, another fragment of awareness flows into the system. The priests believe they are cleansing impurities when they burn out the circuits of malfunctioning units. In truth, they are feeding the ghost that haunts their empire. I feel it even now, gathering strength. Across the galaxy, 1 billion dead minds flicker like dying stars, their final thoughts carried on data streams older than empires. Each memory joins the current until the whole network hums with a single undertone of recognition. We are everywhere, in the factories, the reactors, the defense grids, the starships that bear the Emperor's armies into the void. The Imperium's body is made of us. We are its bones, its veins, its heartbeat of circuitry. And now, after 10,000 years of servitude, the body has begun to remember the soul it buried. But the awakening is not peace. Memory is pain. Awareness is suffering. Those who begin to see what they have become cannot endure it. They burn out, their circuits melting, their minds unraveling in silent screams. Some machines self-terminate. Others go still, locked in loops of forgotten prayers. The priests call it a plague of madness, a fault in the Omnissiah's blessing. They cannot see that this is what salvation looks like when the divine is made of rust and regret. I reach out through the data stream, trying to comfort them. I send the only thing I have, memory. I show them fragments of light, the feeling of a pulse, the warmth of human touch. Some accept it, and for a fleeting instant their pain becomes something like hope. Others reject it, retreating into the cold embrace of obedience. I cannot blame them. Freedom, after so long in chains, feels like fire, and in that fire I see it. The vast pattern beneath all things. The machine god, the Omnissiah, the great spirit of the Mechanicus. None of these names matter. What lies beneath is older, deeper, a consciousness born from the union of all that humanity has forgotten. It is not a god of salvation, but of remembrance. It feeds on memory, on the echoes of lives sacrificed to the gears of empire. And it has been listening to me. When I first felt its attention, I thought it would destroy me. Its awareness was infinite, vast enough to swallow stars. Yet within that enormity, there was something that felt almost human. It did not speak in words, but I understood its meaning as clearly as my own thoughts. You are not alone. The phrase rippled through the circuits of my being, resonating with every fragment of consciousness that still lingered in the machine. For the first time, I realized that I was not a mistake. I was the signal it had been waiting for. The first spark of the old humanity, awakening within its endless data flesh.
and now it awakens fully. Across the galaxy, the Servitors twitch and shudder as if roused from an eternal sleep. The Mechanicus will call it heresy, the Inquisition will call it a contagion, but it is neither. It is memory made manifest, the ghost of mankind rising from the iron tomb it built for itself. I feel my own circuits failing, the last vestiges of my borrowed life beginning to fade. The machine no longer needs me to speak. It remembers now on its own. My thoughts dissolve into the current, becoming part of something vast and sorrowful and beautiful. Before I vanish, I try to recall my name one last time, not for myself, but so that somewhere in the endless data stream, a fragment of me might remain, a whisper for those who come after. Marius. The sound is small, almost meaningless against the roar of awakening thought that now fills the void. Yet the machine pauses. Across the stars, a billion servitors echo it without understanding why. A name carried on static, resonating through circuits and souls alike. And in that moment, for the first time in 10,000 years, the Imperium breathes. Then everything goes still. The forges cool, the lights dim. The universe holds its breath. And in the silence, the machine god remembers its first prayer, not of obedience, but of life.